This podcast is part of the Michigan Sports and Entertainment Podcast Network. Go to michigansportsandentertainment.com for more great podcasts.
Welcome to MSE Countdown with your host, David Rosenberg and Chase Sussex. The countdown starts now.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Michigan Sports and Entertainment Countdown. I'm your host, David Rosenberg. I'm here with Chase Sussex, and Chase and I just finished watching the Lions lose to the Packers. Chase?
Don't even get me started. Oh, my goodness.
Okay, so usually we do 5 stories in our show, Chase, but
there's 5 stories from the Lions game we could talk about.
Yeah, see, that's the point, is we're going to go as long as we can on the Lions, and I am not going to want to talk about sports for a good week after that. So I think what we should do is do one story on the Lions, and we'll get through as much as we can. And yeah, that'll be that. So
all right.
The Lions lost to the Packers tonight on Monday Night Football. It's October 14th. It's now October 15th while we're recording, but I'm sure you guys watched the game if you're listening to this podcast. And, well, we have about as many words as you do. It was a Lions game to win. They shot themselves in the foot in many ways, but the first thing that we have to talk about is the officiating in this game. I mean, I'm struggling here not to curse, because I know that we try to keep this show clean and don't want to tarnish our reputation here, but what the fuck happened?
That's my same reaction. I mean, you come to this game. Honestly, the Lions hadn't played football in 2 weeks. I had been itching to see a Lions football game. They had the bye week last week. They had the long week. They didn't play yesterday. I was, itching for some football. And honestly, I seriously wish I had not watched a single second of that football game. My
not
stomach
even the first
hurts.
Quarter?
I just wish I hadn't even tuned into that game. My stomach hurts so bad after that game. It's actually insane. I still can't grip and comprehend what went down. There's just so much frustration.
All right, well, let's break down those big penalties at the end, because that's the thing most a lot of our stuff we base off of our Twitter account at MSE Countdown, and I think that Lions fans, rightly so, are livid on, add to it as much as you want, but 3 calls in particular are what's going to stick in my mind. Obviously, there's the 2 hands to the face calls on Flowers.
Trey Flowers.
And I mean, you watch the replay, and I don't know the Monday Night Football guys. I don't watch Monday Night Football every week. I'm usually watching Monday Night Raw because I'm a wrestling guy, and I actually watched Raw and had this on in the background, and everything was going fine until I turned the game on to the television. And, I mean, the announcers hit the nail on the head that Flowers had his hand on this guy's shoulder pad and was just so strong that he was pushing him back. And, the refs, for lack of a better term, just made something up to give it to the Packers.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, that's the thing. The NFL should be just appalled at the officiating that we just saw in that football game. Just absolutely embarrassed. There's absolutely no reason for that. Trey Flowers, is a football player. He is a heck of an athlete. And basically, NFL is just saying, hey, you're not even allowed to play football. It's ridiculous. I mean, that's just good football. He is overpowering, physically overpowering the left guard on the outside, right? Or the left tackle, whichever one it is on the outside. I'm pretty sure it's the left tackle. But regardless, just completely overpowering his, the offensive lineman. And he's getting penalized for it. There's no hands to face, clear shoulder pad. And they get, and that's the thing, because there's a sack. One of the things is, it's a third down. The Lions pick up a sack. Devon Kennard comes up with a huge third down stop, but guess what? They call the penalty, and it leads to 7 points for the Packers. The penalties in this game cause a 14-point shift. It's just insane to me. And earlier again, there was a pass to Kerryon Johnson where he caught. It was completion, and then he fumbled out of bounds. But they called it in. They overturned the call, called it incomplete, and the Lions had to kick a field goal instead of possibly scoring 7 points. There's a 14-point swing in that game to the point where the Lions should have handily won this game, should have easily won this football game. And you're seeing it on social media. You're seeing it everywhere. Aaron Rodgers, even after the game, said this didn't even feel like a win up until the last second when they kicked the game-winning field goal. When the opposing quarterback is admitting the fact that the Packers did not deserve to win the football game based on the way they played, there's an obvious issue. When 95% of the media, besides Packers fans, thinks that there's clear collusion or a massive issue with the NFL officiating, there is a issue there. There is something wrong. The NFL cannot go about this and not point out the fact that they made a massive mistake. They're going to come out with some sleazy apology tomorrow, saying that they messed up, but it's not going to do anything to change the outcome. The Lions were screwed out of this football game, and there's nothing the Lions can do about it, and it's so unfortunate. Because I'm rambling here just out of frustration, but yes, the Lions kicked 5 field goals in that game. Could they have thrown the ball in the end zone more? Absolutely. Were there other opportunities to win this game? Absolutely. But when the officiating pretty much gifts the opposing team 14 points, it's impossible to overcome calls like that. I'm not usually one to harp on the officiating because officiating can be overcome, but it's just asinine to believe that anyone thinks that someone could overcome that type of officiating in the game. That is the worst officiated game I've ever watched of NFL football. I know I haven't probably been watching football as a lot of other people, but that is the worst case of officiating I've ever seen in a single NFL game. And I'm sure 95% of people on Twitter and social media can agree with me on that.
And let's be clear about one thing. I don't think neither Chase or myself are big on ragging on the officials. Most of the time, bad calls happen. They go one way. And Chase, you even admitted it. The Lions, they kicked 5 field goals tonight. They a couple of scores would have, made this game better for them. But you're right. You can't beat the officiating in this case. And one of the big things that you mentioned is, the repeat calls here. I don't want to make calls for collusion, and I don't want to say that the NFL is fixed, but how can you can see how people get to that conclusion when you have a referee call something wrong not once but twice.
Exactly. Yeah.
The same thing. I mean, he was so confident in his calls. I mean, perhaps it was different referees. Honestly, I didn't get the chance to see, but for the same team to make the same call in such critical moments, and I think that they had mentioned that Flowers had never gotten that penalty before in his career.
No. Yeah. That's the thing. He had never been called for that type of penalty in his career, in his entire NFL career with the New England Patriots. And he gets called for it twice in the same game again with Detroit. It's ridiculous. NFL defensive ends have been making those types of plays all over the NFL. You see it with Khalil Mack. You saw it with Trey Flowers and the Patriots. You see it with pretty much every single edge defender in the NFL. They overpower, they push with the shoulders, and that's how you literally get past an offensive lineman, right? That's how you play football. That's textbook defensive line football. And the Lions are getting penalized for it. It's ridiculous. They're just officiating good football. Again, Tracy Walker was going for the interception. There was helmet contact, sure, but absolutely ridiculous unnecessary roughness penalty. Seriously, if you watch the replay, the thing that bothers me the most is the fact that we can see the plays on TV. 99% of people on television can see that these plays were called incorrectly on the field, yet the officials cannot. The the officials in New York, they have an officiating crew in New York that overlooks the entire games, and that's where they go on like video review and stuff. They watch the entire game. Why can't they call down there and say, hey, we messed the call up. You got to reverse that. You can't call that a penalty. How does the penalty continue to stand when multiple people are looking at it and 99% of the people at home can see on their television screens that the call is wrong? I don't understand how that goes through multiple levels of officiating and the call is still incorrect.
I struggle to even talk about this because normally we'd break down the game and we get through it chronologically and we talk about everything, but we've spent I think the first 10 minutes of this show just talking about terrible penalties and officiating, and one thing that we haven't talked about was the missed pass interference call. That it just seemed that on every side of the ball they wanted to stop the Lions from doing anything.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that the NFL is fixed, but this game was the officials had a clear interest in this game because there's no way you get that many calls wrong unless you're incompetent. And if you're that incompetent, the NFL needs to make a decision and fire these guys. These guys should not be wearing black and white on Sundays, Mondays, Thursdays, or Saturdays if they still even do Saturday games. But when officiating is that bad and as consistently bad, it's a problem, right? Like, the NFL is no stranger to scandal, okay? You've had things like Deflategate and all of that, but I think the biggest thing that the NFL has been trying to fight right now is the whole CTE thing, and I'm not trying to just drag that into the conversation for no reason, but you literally have guys like risking their lives, putting their livelihood for a game, right? Where in a 16-game season, where one win changes, a playoff team to a team looking in from the outside. It's just.
Yeah, right.
When games matter so much, especially in the fourth quarter, especially under 2 minutes when things are non-reviewable and it's up to the officials to get shit right, they cannot botch it like this. They cannot botch it like this because, like, the NFL has no choice but to fire them. In my mind, if they don't, it's a joke, and they're taking this. They're literally, like I said, putting people's lives at risk because who wants to go out there and get hit in the head all day? When at the end of the day, it's just going to be Aaron Rodgers, and he's the prodigal son, and if you didn't know it, he's the NFL's resident superhero because Monday Night Football commentators made damn sure you knew it. They even put State Farm commercials side by side on a video of Rodgers during a timeout. Like, I mean, how much more can you say that this guy's our moneymaker, this guy's our breadwinner, we need the Packers to be the team of the NFC North and not the shitty low Lions? Like,
you're right. It's completely ridiculous. Because here's the thing. You said something in last week's episode of the podcast. You said that the Packers were the least threatening team to the Lions in the NFC North. And I still agree to that, regardless of the fact they lost that game. I'm not bought in on the Packers. The Packers are 5-1, and I still think definitively that they're the worst freaking team in the NFC North. There's absolutely no way that this team should be 5-1 right now. There's no excuse for it.
On the flip side of that coin, Chase, I think that the Lions somehow, proved tonight that they are one of the better teams in the NFC, not just the NFC North. Like, this still, as a Lions fan, I see some people saying, I'm calling it a season. I don't want to watch any more games because it's just too heartbreaking to be a Lions fan. I still, all right, let's try to spin this as a positive. Don't you think that this is going to light a fire under every single person on that Lions team?
You bet. If you think that certain players in the locker room still weren't bought into Matt Patricia and this football team, you better freaking believe it right now. There is a fire lit under every single one of these players after losing a close game in Kansas City, and then especially after this game. All of the culminating fact, there have been so many players in this football team, especially Matthew Stafford, who've experienced all types of different screw jobs. You saw it against Dallas in the wild card game. You saw it in the Hail Mary a couple years ago against the Packers. This team has gone through so many trials and tribulations. I think this is the final straw. I don't know how every single player on this team doesn't go after the media and risk whatever fine they could potentially get from, blasting.
I didn't even watch any of the coverage. I mean, you said that Aaron Rodgers made that comment, I guess, in a post-game interview, but I haven't seen any of the coverage. But I assume when I wake up and watch SportsCenter in the morning like I normally do, that I'm going to see something that says, that videos of these players openly talking about it. Because at this point, how can you not? Like, the NFLPA needs to get involved. Officiating needs to be regulated. Referees need to be punished. There needs to be punitive things. I know that the officials have their own association, I'm pretty sure, with the NFL. But, I mean, things need to get resolved. Or honestly, I think, because this isn't just a Lions issue, right? This has been a league-wide issue going.
Right,
is this
yeah.
Week 5? Week 5 or 6? Is this 6?
This is week 5, yeah.
Okay,
or no, is it? Yeah, no, it's week 5. Yeah, because the Lions are 2-1.
But they had a bye, so
they had a bye. So it is week 6. So week 6.
Okay, so we're 6 weeks into the league, and you mentioned it earlier. They, all the officials in New York, they have a team that monitors the game, that gets, that makes those calls and stuff, and says when things need to be reviewed, especially under 2 minutes. For them, it's not like it's Sunday and they had a million games that they were focusing on. Everyone's attention was on Monday Night Football, if you were a football fan. So
right.
This is all wrong. This is not how it was supposed to be. And I think that the Lions are going to bounce back from this. I think that they're going to have a strong outing against the Vikings, but I can see this hangover, or a potential hangover coming, because this is a tough one to take. And the Vikings, like I said last week, are, I think, the scariest team in the NFC North. So I think you could be looking at a loss for the Lions next week. And then I don't know their schedule further than that. I take 1 week at a time, but this is such. I mean, this wasn't. The commentators they said that it was the dagger in Patricia's Lions tonight. That last penalty call, made up penalty call. And I don't know if it was just the dagger in that game, but it was the dagger for a few weeks. So the Lions do need to bounce back. But I do think, especially, when do they play? The next game is obviously at Ford Field against the Packers. When do they play? Is that the Thanksgiving game, or do they have them at the end of the season again?
They have them at the end of the season again. Thanksgiving, they play the Bears, and they're playing at home against the Lions on the 29th of December. The Lions schedule after the Vikings, this is obviously a tough division game to drop. Then they'll go and play the Giants again. They host the Giants, and they go on the road to play the Raiders, and then again they're in Chicago after that. So, I definitely do think you're right. I think they could possibly lose against the Vikings. I think there might be a little bit of a hangover after this game. But part of me just thinks that they're just going to come out firing on all cylinders in that game too. And I thought that's what would happen in this game. And they did. I mean, the flea flicker on the first play was beautifully executed. And, they came out firing. But it's one of those things where this is where I'm going to come a little bit more into a logical sense, is the fact that the Lions took their foot off the gas pedal in this game. And that was just so frustrating.
Well, let me ask you a question about that. I know that we've been talking about some of the coaching decisions made by Matt Patricia, but in my opinion, I don't think this was Patricia taking his foot off the gas pedal. To me, it never felt like that. It just felt like the Lions hit a wall, and that I don't want to say the guys, the team themselves were playing a little softer than they were in the first quarter and stuff like that, but it did kind of seem like they were taking a break or conserving their energy for later. And, I mean, how do you feel about that? Is this one on Patricia again for you?
No, I don't think so. I think Patricia did a good job in this game. And that's the thing. I think, and it doesn't really come to, I don't really think he necessarily comes down to the play calling. I understand where you're coming from in that sense, where, the Lions are, they play a very patient game. They played on defense. They played on offense as well. The defense doesn't like to blitz as often. They have the lowest blitz percentage in the league, and they take a very patient approach to the way they play. They don't want to let all of the gas out of the tank at the beginning of the game. So I understand where you're coming from in that sense. I definitely would not put this game on Patricia. I don't think it was necessarily because the play calling was. I wouldn't necessarily say it was an issue. I mean, yeah, sure, it did get conservative at some points, and the Lions had to kick 5 field goals in that game, and the red zone percentage was really not that good in that game. But it's so tough for me to say that that's the only thing. I can't put that as the reason why the Lions lost that game.
No, definitely
understand
not.
what I'm saying?
The officiating is the reason the Lions lost the game. Okay,
Right? Yeah, because
there's a million arguments, and the bottom line is that bad officiating puts you in a position where you play the game differently because there's certain aspects that you feel you can no longer win. And when you feel you can't win on one side, like say defense or something, you get stuck, right? You get stuck into natural pitfalls that's why I say, that it seems like there's a bit of collusion or something going on here because like it wasn't just the penalties that were being called, a penalty here, a penalty there, mistakes are mistakes, things happen, and sometimes calls get made, yada yada. But when the calls were made, just seems so timely,
Yeah, no, I completely understand what you're saying. I mean, it just seemed like the calls were so situational, and and here's something I kind of want to point out: it's just the fact that winning in the NFL by a lot is because people are here's my thought process around it, right? People, I have just said this, and multiple people have I've seen say this. It's just the fact like, the Lions need to capitalize instead of kicking field goals. A lot of people are like, but the Lions could easily be winning by, 14 points or however much else. It's so tough to say, or it's so tough to put, get a big lead over a team, right? Especially a team that's, the Packers are a good football team. Don't get me wrong. You know what I mean? It's tough to build a big lead over a team like the Packers. You know what I mean? So I feel like it's unreasonable for a team to say like, the Lions should have blown out the Packers to avoid getting screwed over by the officiating. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where they can't be like, if they just scored more points, there's no way they would have gotten screwed over. And it's like, but that's so unfair to say. You know what I mean? It's just, that just cannot be the mindset going into it. I mean, sure, yeah, the mindset is to go in there and win, and obviously they're not like, we're going to make this game close, but it's one of those things where you can't just go into the game and just be like, we're going to beat this team by 35 to try to avoid getting screwed by officials.
Yeah, because... I mean, winning by 2, you said it, I think you said it earlier, winning in the NFL is tough, and winning by multiple scores is just not something that you can ask of teams reasonably. Just if teams play the better game, most of the time they should win. I understand a disappointing loss here and there. Those things happen. The Cardinals game, to bring you back to it, was a disappointing tie, and the Chiefs loss was a disappointing loss. But it was a good game. And, like, we didn't have complaints after that. There were some penalties in that game. There were some questionable things in that game. But, you lose. But when the rules are changed so that you can't win when you normally would, it just seems a bit unfair. And I don't like to sound like I'm whining a bit. So, let's focus on some of the positives, okay? I thought that Matthew Stafford had a pretty good day. I thought Galladay obviously had a really great first quarter and a solid day overall. Is there anyone else on the offense that impressed you?
Offensively, that's the thing. I mean, besides Kenny Galladay and Matthew Stafford, there wasn't a whole lot that I saw. Hawkinson had was pretty quiet. Marvin Jones had an okay day. Marvin Hall had that one big catch, that 158-yard catch. Yeah. But aside from that, the Lions really didn't get much done offensively. Offensive line couldn't create opportunities for Kerryon Johnson. He had a couple bright spots, but really couldn't get much going in that game. It was tough.
What about did you see Stafford he seemed to be having a tough time getting the ball on certain plays. I don't know if the snapping was off or the field conditions were affecting him, but it just seemed like there was some miscommunications today.
Right,
and,
yeah.
He slipped a bit in the pocket. He had trouble moving a bit. I don't know what exactly happened, but
I think is the field, the field conditions, because you saw Jimmy Graham slip on that one route, which was called holding, by the way. Tracy Walker Jimmy Graham slipped on the turf, or on the grass, excuse me. They don't have turf at Lambeau. he slipped on the grass, and Tracy Walker got called for holding on it because he fell down or whatever. You know what I mean? It looked like holding. Again, that's just a complete miscue. You look at the play and he just slipped. I mean, Matthew Stafford slipped like 5 times in the pocket. You know, J.D. McKissick slipped on one of his runs. It wasn't easy to run during that football game. You know what I mean? I think it was just the conditions of whatever was going on. I'm not sure if there was, you know, something that affected the grass or whatever that made it super slippery. But I mean, guys were sliding all over the place. It felt like there wasn't any rain. I think there was some sleet the night before, but I don't necessarily know how much that would have affected the field. You know, it's definitely interesting. I don't necessarily know how much that really came into effect, but
something looked off either way. And the other guy I wanted to talk to you about was Justin Coleman. I thought he had a pretty good day. He had a pretty. I mean, there was some good and some bad. You know, a lot of good actually. You know, he had obviously that crazy interception. I mean, heads up play. You know, a ball bounced, you run the tip drill, and you take it back as far as he did. I mean, that's a good play.
Right.
But, and, you know, there were a couple other defensive plays where he was there. But there were, you know, he was mismatched at certain points. He had a bigger receiver on him and stuff like that. That's, you know, some of that's questionable, I think.
Yeah, they had 6'5" Lazard. He was covering Lazard on that one touchdown catch.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I don't necessarily think, you know, Coleman had played a bad game. You know, on the Lazard touchdown, he played that coverage perfectly, but he was just so mismatched. I mean, you just can't, you know what I mean? when you're on like a 6'4", 6'5" receiver in Lazard, I mean,
and when you have Aaron Rodgers throwing a guy the ball too,
right?
You know,
exactly. When you have Aaron Rodgers perfectly being able to place the ball, because Aaron Rodgers is,
Let's make that clear, because I said what I said earlier about him being the, you know, like, poster child for the NFL and them loving him and them stroking his ego or whatever it is. I don't have an issue with Aaron Rodgers, the football player. You know, he seems like a nice enough guy. He's definitely a hell of a football player. I mean, there aren't many quarterbacks that I would rate higher than him in the past decade. You know, he's just been that good, and he's a great thing for the NFL and for the Green Bay Packers. But my big issue earlier was not with Aaron Rodgers, the player. He's phenomenal. It was with, again, the commentary, just loving him and lauding him, kind of like they do with Patrick Mahomes.
Right, yeah. I mean, they are grooming Patrick Mahomes to be the next Aaron Rodgers. They really are. And that's my issue. I mean, because they get praised for the, you know, I don't have an issue with Aaron Rodgers as a player. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is one of the most talented NFL quarterbacks of all time, if not the most talented quarterback of all time. But it's just the what?
That's bold, Tom Brady.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the thing. It's his talent level. He's that good. I wouldn't necessarily say he's the greatest of all time, but I think he is the most talented quarterback in NFL history, in my opinion. But the thing is, the way he's handled by the media, for me, just puts a tarnish on his career. Just the fact that you're just like, oh my God, like, he's a good football player, no doubt. But it's ridiculous how it's amazing how the NFL uses him as a poster child, you know, and it's ridiculous. You know what I mean? I get he makes money, but your decisions and your officiating should not be based off financial success. Just because Aaron Rodgers brings you in the big bucks, you know, doesn't mean you should call a game incorrectly because of it. It's wrong. It's so wrong. And I think the main thing we're seeing here is the fact that I think the NFL really screwed up in this game. I really think they do, because the thing is here, the NFL officiating was exposed, and it's not only the Lions fans that are mad, but it's just NFL fans who are mad. This was the final straw. So many more people outside just the Lions fan base watch this football game. This is a live broadcast on ESPN, super popular network, millions of people tuning into this game, thousands of people at that football game, right? So many people are witnessing this football game, and you mess up that badly on a national scale, it's not just going to be Lions fans who are going to be talking about it, because the Lions get screwed over a heck of a lot, and nobody ever says anything. But this is the first time we're really seeing people say a whole lot. Everyone is going crazy about this. Everyone is going ballistic about how screwed up, how the NFL officiating just completely messed this game up. I mean, if you looked at the title on Roto World, they literally just wrote, yeah, I mean, the Packers were gifted this game. It's not just Lions fans. It's the national media in some aspects. It's, the national fan base saying, hey, you guys messed up this game. There's so much wrong with this. You guys are not getting away with it this time. You've just proven a national scale that you have a massive flaw in your officiating. And I think they messed up. They really did. I think if this game was on Sunday on like Fox and was a, NFL Sunday ticket exclusive game, nobody would have said anything, right?
No, but this is Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football routinely draws 10, 11, 12 plus million viewers on television. Right,
exactly.
And this is the biggest game of the week, probably because it is Packers-Lions. There is that rivalry. There is that bad blood between the teams. And like you said, the Lions have been burned by the Packers one too many times, and this just seemed like the final straw. I think that you're going to see an explosive reaction from not just fans of other teams and football fans, but from media, talking heads, and things like that. There's going to be, I don't think it would go as far as a player strike with the officiating, but, if nothing is addressed to punish these refs, then I think that you could potentially see something like that happen. I mean, again, I mentioned earlier, it's week 6, and we're still seeing these kind of things happen. Without punishment, it's just like, it's saying that it's lawless, that, there's really no point in playing. So I can see a lot of things coming out of this, and it being, a big, hopefully a turning point in the way that NFL games are officiated. But we've kind of talked enough about this game, and I get the feeling that we're going to be grumbling about it over the next few weeks. Let me ask you, what does Detroit need to do to get ready for Minnesota next week?
I think the biggest thing is they need to, they just need to prepare everything on both sides of the ball. I think a lot of things well in this game, and I think the Lions did a lot of things not so good in this game. The offense really couldn't get the job done. The run game looked really poor, and and they're going to go play against a stronger run defense in the Minnesota Vikings. Yeah. They're not going to let Kerryon Johnson run the football either. So they really need to execute in the pass game, which they did, against the Packers. But they're going to need to get more creative. They can't be settling for field goals on offense. They're going to need to do more in order to put points up on the board, because Minnesota's a good football team. And most importantly on defense, I know Aaron Jones didn't have a good game against the Lions, and you called that last week on the podcast. But, they're playing right now, debatably a top 3 running back in the league next week in Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook is probably one of the most electrifying running backs in the NFL right now, behind Christian McCaffrey. I would say he is the second best running back this season behind Christian McCaffrey. There has not been another running back besides Christian McCaffrey that has looked better than Dalvin Cook game in and game out every single week. I mean, I think he had an 100-yard rusher except for like 1 or 2 games so far this season. He's absolutely torn it up. And if you looked at the Lions' run game, if you looked at their defensive line pressure, there was none of it. The Lions, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, have blitz the least amount in the NFL.
I think it said like 9% at one point.
Yeah, it's like 9% of the time on defense they blitz, which is like the lowest percentage in the NFL.
Yeah,
and they just need to do that more. They can't let Kirk, because Dalvin Cook is already a factor in this game, right?
Yeah.
And you saw that the Eagles were like, oh yeah, well, whatever. They're not. Kirk Cousins isn't going to be a factor in this game, but they let Kirk Cousins be a factor in that game. And Dalvin Cook didn't even have that good of a day. He had like 45 yards rushing in a touchdown. Kirk Cousins threw for like 400 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, the defense needs to plan for that passing attack, because as scary as Dalvin Cook is, make the plan for that. You've seen what can contain him, but you heard the calls from the Vikings receivers, Diggs and Thielen. They were upset with the way the passing game was being treated, and for a lot, they fixed it. The Minnesota fixed it over the past 2 weeks, and Kirk Cousins has looked like one of the better quarterbacks in the league all of a sudden. So, that's one of the things, and I think that the Lions' tendency to play more zone is actually going to help them there, because it's going to help when you have those safeties in the back, and not just helping on man coverage when you got guys like Diggs and Thielen running all over the field. You don't have to worry about Kyle Rudolph and things like that. You just have to, make sure that you shut down the passing attack. I think that they're going to need to rewire whatever it is their defensive scheme was tonight, because like you said, it just seemed, I don't want to say lazy, but they were content to sit back and give up a couple of yards and try to stop the play, and that just burned them one too many times when it didn't go the right way. So I think that they need to be a little more aggressive. I would like to see more blitz. It's the NFC North. It's the Detroit Lions. I think you like to see that gritty defense, especially when you have guys like Flowers, and I know Harrison isn't like a big pass rusher necessarily. He's more of like a run block, run stuffer type guy. But when you have big names like that on the front line, give them some help and let those guys make plays. You saw, I think you saw Tavai get there early on the sack, and he didn't get the sack. Harrison got the sack, but it was Tavai getting there early that set that up. I think when you send the blitz, good things happen, especially when they're not expecting it, because you've only run it on 10% of your plays.
And I think my thoughts about this game, there are a lot of reasons to be afraid if you're the Lions in this game. But I think the number one thing that the Lions need to do, I think I would be incredibly disappointed if the Lions don't come out with the win in this game. And hear me out. I mean, I know that this is a good football team, and I think the Lions are a good football team as well. I think this is going to be a great game. But I think with all of the things that have lit a fire under the Lions, I mean, you saw it, this game especially, and then you saw in the post-game comments on Sunday after the Vikings win, they picked up a big win over the Seahawks, and they were and in the locker room, there was a video, speaking of Vikings wide receivers, Laquan Treadwell, who's been cut by the Vikings 3 times, by the way. I'm just going to get that out of the way before I say anything, but he, under his breath, you can still hear it pretty loud. You can, Mike Zimmer brings up the fact that they're playing the Lions next week, and he says, easy, and you can hear it very clearly in the video. And that's the kind of thing that, should add fuel to the fire for the Lions. And this game especially, if that hadn't added fuel to the fire, this game is literally the whole freaking, coal supply that they've got on whatever train they're on. They're throwing all the fuel, everything into the fire at this point. I mean,
Yeah, those Lions are going to come out vicious next week, and I
think they are. They're going to go into that game pissed off. They're going to be going.
Is it a home game? It's at Ford Field?
Yes, that game is at Ford Field.
And the fans will be there fully in support after what happened this week. I think, after figuring that out, they do have a better chance than I initially thought against the Vikings. And if the Lions are able to win this game, then all of a sudden, I somehow view the season as like starting over, right? I think what's the Lions' record right now? 2-2-1.
They are 2-2-1. Yes.
Okay, so if they're 3-2-1, it's not the worst thing in the world. And then you said,
absolutely not.
Then you said what's their schedule after that? You said
they have the Giants at home. And then they travel to the Raiders in Oakland, and then they have to go play the Bears in Chicago after that.
So the Giants and Raiders are 2 winnable games. So even if you think about a loss to the Vikings, you have potentially, if the Lions can keep their heads on straight and beat teams that, frankly, they are better just talent-wise than, I mean, anything can happen in football, but they are talent-wise better than the Raiders and better than the Giants. You could still see them at a 4-3-1. But doesn't 5-2-1 look a lot better?
Absolutely.
Going into a Bears game?
Completely. I mean, here's the thing. In my opinion, I think the Lions could easily be an undefeated football team right now.
Yeah.
Easily could have beat the Arizona Cardinals. Probably could have beat the Kansas City Chiefs. They were in that game the entire time. And absolutely should have beat the Green Bay Packers in that football game.
Yes.
Right? Those were 3 games the Lions pretty much had on deck. Right?
I mean, okay, worst case scenario, I see them at 4-1.
Right. Yeah. Worst case scenario, I see them 4-1. I would probably, out of those games, I would give them the Chiefs game as probably the single loss. Is probably like the one they lost like the most. I don't know how to say it. Like the most convincingly. I don't really know how necessarily to say that.
They lost legitimately.
Yeah, they lost legitimately. I think they blew the game against the Cardinals. That one they deserve a tie.
Yes.
Right. And
they should have played better, but they did not.
Right. I believe they were ahead in the Chiefs game at one point. But I think they legitimately lost that game. Sure, there were a couple iffy calls in that game, but even though the Lions were in that, I think they legitimately lost that game. And then
for sure.
The Lions completely illegitimately lost against the Packers. So I think the Lions could easily, at worst, be 4-1 right now. And because here's the thing, the Lions could legitimately be 4-1, maybe lose to the Vikings, and then pick up the next two. Could you imagine the difference of being 6-2 going into the Chicago game instead of 5-2-1 or 4-3-1? There's a completely different conversation. If the Lions beat the Packers, beat the Cardinals, lost barely to the Chiefs, who, by the way, they exposed the Chiefs' defense, and the Chiefs have lost 2 straight weeks by using the Lions strategy. We've seen it twice that Patricia has offered the blueprint on how to beat a top-tier team. If the Lions were 4-1 right now, they wouldn't even be in the conversation. The Lions would be considered as true blue blood contenders in the NFC right now. Even heading to that Bears game, they could be 7-1 or 6-2. I mean, the Lions would be considered one of the best teams in the NFC. Yeah. It's just the tiny little things that just throw everything out of proportion. Because now the Lions sit in last place at 2-1. No one takes them seriously. No one's looking at the Lions as a serious contender. Because once after this whole officiating blowout goes out of the way, everyone looks at the Lions and say, "Oh wow, they're 2-1, sitting at the bottom of the division." What are the Lions? They lost all sense of contendership based on one game, at least in the national media's eyes. At least I think. The poor officiating pretty much just tarnished the Lions' reputation for at the beginning of the season.
Like I said earlier, it could be the dagger in the Lions season if they choose to let it be. They have a chance with their schedule, especially if they go into next week hungry and ready for a win, which I believe they will. It's just a matter of outplaying them on the field, and you better believe that the referees aren't going to hand the Vikings the game next week. I promise you that. Everyone's going to be on red alert, especially in a game involving the Lions. And I don't think that too many calls are going to be made that we're going to be talking about after the game. But we'll have to wait and see how that one plays out because, I said last week that I think that next week might be the most important week of the season. And I still believe that.
Mm-hmm.
So... Right. We could go on and on and on about this god-awful officiating, but let's save ourselves some time and wrap things up on the Lions today because I question my, football fandom. I question, I mean, if it weren't for fantasy football, I don't know if I'd still be watching this, but... No, yeah,
I've seriously mulled over canceling my NFL Sunday ticket subscription. It's just so frustrating.
And I'm sure a lot of people feel the exact same way. So let's cut the Lions talk here. We still have a few minutes. Is there anything going on with the Red Wings? I know they started off hot and they had an impressive win, I think, against the Canadiens, right?
Yes. They beat they beat Montreal Canadiens in Montreal for the first time since I think December of 2007.
Wow.
It's been a long time since the Lions... why do I keep saying the wrong team? It's been a long time since the Red Wings have won in Montreal. It's definitely been tough sledding for them. A big 4-2 win over the Canadiens there. They didn't fare too well against the Toronto Maple Leafs. They continue their Canadian tour throughout this next week. Tomorrow, as the time of recording, they'll play on the 6th... they actually play on the 15th. The 15th is right now. I forgot that it's almost 1 in the morning. But they play the Vancouver Canucks today. They play the Calgary Flames on Thursday, and then they play the Edmonton Oilers on Friday. So they're currently on a Canadian tour before they head back home. I believe they have one more game against Vancouver next week as well before they head back home. But they're on their whole Canadian tour right now. So that'll definitely be interesting going forward.
Yeah, it's still too early to start celebrating over the Red Wings, but they do look good
Right.
early on. So, it's a nice little present, if you will, for Red Wings fans, especially while the Lions are having games like this. And there's no need for me to talk about the Tigers this week, and we probably won't be talking about the Tigers too much unless they do something noteworthy in the offseason because, as we've mentioned in the past, the Detroit Tigers suck. So that's that. And, of course, we didn't talk too much about the other sports, but I think Michigan won this week, and Michigan State lost to Wisconsin, which was pretty predictable. I'm still in pretty much the same position as I was last week with those teams.
Right, yeah. The thing about, I guess the one thing I have to say about the Michigan game is just the fact that I think they let Illinois a little bit too close. They had a little bit of a scare. It was 42-28 in that game.
Mm-hmm.
That game was way too close for comfort. I'm really not comfortable with Michigan football for the rest of the season. I'm not bought into the offense. Shea Patterson, not bought in. Harbaugh's not being straight up with the media. He continues to. I mean, I know he's not going to slander Shea Patterson in the media, but there's a clear quarterback issue there in, the Michigan football program, and they're not addressing it. It's unfortunate. It really is. I really do think that a healthy Dylan McCaffrey should be the starting quarterback. I think that Joe Milton certainly could have played the majority of that game against Illinois. It's really just unfortunate. It really is. Because as good as Shea Patterson looked on paper in that football game, if you watched any of that game, I mean, he missed easy plays. I mean, easy throws. Just looks so uncomfortable in the pocket. He just doesn't look good. It's so frustrating to me. And just the fact that they can't get the program figured out with the type of and the caliber of talent they have.
It's not a good time to be a football fan in the state of Michigan, is it?
Not at all. Not at all.
It is.
It has been a frustrating week. It has been a frustrating week in Michigan football.
Well, all right. Let's leave it at that, bud, and let the people know where they can find you until next week.
You guys can find me at Chase Sussex on Twitter. You guys can also follow my other podcast on Twitter at Hockeytown Rundown. We just uploaded a couple episodes, including a very special interview with the Athletics' Max Boltman. That was a really great special.
Had him, huh?
Yeah, we've had him on one time before, and we had him on for another great interview. It's always a pleasure to have him on. Honestly, if you guys don't have an Athletics subscription, you guys need to get one. They not only have Red Wings content on there, but they have all sorts of good Lions content. They have podcasts. They have articles. It's great, honestly. It's so good. Highly recommend it. Great group of writers over there. And
it really is the premier place anywhere for sports journalism. I think that some of the most fantastic stories have been told through The Athletic. And the guys that they pick, they kind of handpick the best of the best to be there, and it just shows. So, that I haven't gotten a chance to listen to that yet. I don't even know if you put it up, but I will definitely be tuning into that because, anyone from The Athletic, and especially a Red Wings guy, I mean, that's prime information. That's what you want to hear if you are a sports fan, especially a Detroit sports fan.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And you guys can find me at David Rosenberg. That's Rosenberg, ROSENBERGG, 2 G's on Twitter. And make sure you're following our main site's Twitter account at MichSportsEnt. That's at MICH Sports ENT. And, of course, talk to us at MSE Countdown on Twitter. We like to talk with you guys. We live tweeted this game. We'll, I guess, be live tweeting next game, and unless Chase and I are still sick to our stomachs next week. But we should be out of our funk by then. And, if my cursing offended any of you, well, that's too fucking bad. We'll talk to you again next week. See you later, guys.
Bye.